Well, welcome to Story Time again with Pastor Brian. I had chosen this book a little while ago while we were still in Lent, but I thought that, we were just a couple days past Easter and it might still be a good story to hear. This is called Love One Another, The Last Days of Jesus, and it's written by Lauren Thompson and illustrated by Elizabeth Uyehara. I believe that's how you pronounce it, Uyehara. All right. So again, love one another, the last days of Jesus. Once there lived a man named Jesus. Jesus was a teacher. He was wise and good, kind to the poor, the sick, and the outcast. He traveled the countryside and spoke to all of God's love and forgiveness. Jesus taught, love your neighbor, both friend and enemy, for in heaven all are loved. Forgive those who wrong you, and you too will be forgiven. Trust in God and love one another. Many who gathered to listen were filled with hope and comfort. Jesus taught, God is always near. Heaven is all around us, even now. We have only to look for it. Some who heard Jesus' teachings wanted to be with him always, to learn his ways and wisdom. They felt all they had and became his disciples. They left all they had and became his disciples. They did not always understand what Jesus taught, but they loved him as he loved them. One day, Jesus led his disciples to the great city of Jerusalem. When he entered the gates of the city, people cheered as if he were a king. Jesus went to the holy temple and began to teach, and again he spoke of love. A man asked, which of all teachings is greatest? Jesus answered, love God and love one another. These teachings together are the greatest. Crowds drew near to hear Jesus' simple but powerful words. The temple priests grew angry with him and envious. Does he think he is wiser than we are? They grumbled to one another. Does he think he is a new king? All week, as Jesus taught in the temple, the priests plotted how to arrest him. One evening, Jesus gathered his disciples for a meal away from the crowds. I have wanted to be with you one last time, Jesus said, for soon, I fear, one of you will betray me. The disciples were saddened and alarmed. They each asked, do you mean me? And they wondered which of them could betray the teacher they loved. They did not know that for 30 silver coins, the disciple named Judas had agreed to help the priests arrest Jesus. Later, Jesus and the disciples went together to a garden. Only Judas did not follow them. Jesus was deeply grieved and troubled. He knew that something terrible would soon happen. He asked his disciples to keep watch while he prayed. The disciples wanted to do as Jesus asked, but they were weary and could not stay awake. Full of sorrow, Jesus prayed alone. Whatever may come, let God's will be done. Jesus woke the disciples where they lay. Could you not keep watch for even 1 hour? He asked sadly. Rise, for the one who will betray me is here. Just then Judas entered the garden, leading a band of soldiers sent by the priests. Judas called to Jesus, Teacher! And he kissed him. Jesus whispered, Friend, do what you have come to do. Then the soldiers took hold of Jesus, for the kiss had been assigned to seize him. The soldiers led Jesus away, but the disciples did not follow. They were afraid they too would be captured. They deserted Jesus and fled. That night, the temple priests gathered to judge their prisoner Jesus. They questioned him and mocked him, asking, "Do you not call yourself a king?" And Jesus answered only, "You say that I do." For he knew the priests had already judged against him. The priests grew even angrier. They declared that Jesus had broken the holy laws and should be punished with death. At dawn, they brought Jesus to Pilate, the Roman ruler of the land. Pilate too questioned Jesus, "Are you then a new king?" Jesus answered only, "So you are saying." Pilate could find no proof that Jesus had done wrong, but the priests had stirred up the crowd outside. "Put him to death!" they cried. "Put him to death!" Pilate feared the angry crowd. He let the soldiers take Jesus away. The soldiers brought Jesus to a hill outside the city, and they put him on a cross. Jesus uttered a final prayer. And then he died. A man who loved Jesus took his body and carefully placed it in a tomb. He rolled a large stone in front of the opening. Then he left to mourn the death of Jesus. Two days later, another friend of Jesus, a woman named Mary, came to the tomb. The large stone had been rolled away. Mary looked inside the dark opening. The tomb was empty. Mary began to cry. She was afraid that someone had taken Jesus' body. Then she saw a man close by. She heard him ask, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "Someone has taken our dear teacher away. Can you tell me where?" Then she heard the man call her by name, "Mary." Suddenly she knew him. It was Jesus she saw before her. She heard him say, "Go tell the others what you have seen." Mary found the disciples where they had gathered in hiding. "Jesus lives!" she exclaimed. But the disciples did not believe her. They were deep in mourning, weeping with grief and remorse, for they knew they had deserted Jesus, and then he had died. Suddenly they saw Jesus there among them. The disciples were startled and afraid. "Do not be troubled," they heard Jesus say. "Be at peace, and know that I am with you always." Then the disciples rejoiced. Their grief was ended, for Jesus had died, and yet he lived. "Go now," they heard Jesus say. "Teach others as I have taught you. Forgive and love. As I have loved you, so you must love one another." The disciples were filled with great peace and happiness, for now they understood in their hearts what Jesus had taught. They knew their wrongs were forgiven, and that love was greater than hate, greater even than death. In his love, Jesus lived on. Joyously, the disciples set out to bring Jesus' teaching to everyone, and to tell the wondrous story of this day, Easter Day, to all the world. The end. Thanks for joining me for Story Time with Pastor Brian. I look forward to when I can share another story with you.